Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Reacts, where today we have ourselves a track from an act named Triela titled Gecko. And if we switch over to here, we actually have ourselves the EP Gecko from Triela here, if I'm not mispronouncing that. We've got the art up on the screen here. There's a total of 5 tracks on this. We're going to be reviewing the first, listening through it from start till finish, and we're going to hear what we think. And let's go, let's do it. What do we got? I mean, that's absolutely filthy in terms of tone. Curious about videos though. That was a really surreal, interesting experience. I don't really think I've listened to music like that before. I'm going to talk about this track more in the conclusion. Because welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from an act named Triela titled Gecko off of the Gecko EP. In this section I'm going to be providing an overall sort of song analysis from vocals all the way through to production, as well as any applicable constructive critique, and then my sort of general thoughts from a listener's perspective. But first of all, what do we think this track is about? I'm not sure what this track is about. I mean, I heard the Gecko part in the vocals, and there were several lines that were kind of shouted throughout this track or spoken there, but I just couldn't get the words through clearly, and I can't help but feel like that's maybe a deliberate thing. Then maybe there's like a line which said like, get it up, or that one and done. Like there were syllables that I heard, but I just couldn't get the words through clearly. They were underneath the kind of mask and filtering of a whole bunch of the other stuff that was going on. It's a very kind of edgy experimental experience listening through this. Apparently, as I understand it, they make experimental electro music using drum machines and synthesizers, and they produce on Linux, which is awesome. I think it's great that we're sort of trying different ways to sort of make music. And when you combine a lot of maybe just sort of like unexpected or again sort of experimental textures together, but can still make something that has a sense of musicality behind it like this, you know, like firmly a sense of musicality. You don't necessarily need the vocals to be too present or to make a complete barren amount of sense in order to be able to appreciate the experience. They were great as an accenting kind of mid-range kind of form factor within the piece there, a nice bit of coloration there to add a bit of sort of mystique to it at the same time. And if anything, I think the lack of being able to hear the vocals clearly really kind of sort of encourages you to listen more deeply to the music and get further, more lost in it. The track itself at 2 minutes 50 is nice and short. It's right within that 2 to 4 minute sweet spot, where if it's less than 2 minutes, then you might be missing some important context, your stuff might have been underdeveloped, and if it's over 4 minutes, then you're going to need to potentially sort of reinforce or change things up or add new chapters or add further sort of dimensions to the piece in order to be able to keep the existing ideas interesting or to kind of keep the listener's attention prolonged, I suppose. It's made up of a lot of, as I mentioned, sort of drum machines and synthesizers there. Some of them sounded like lead guitars there. There are lots of fun concepts within it. But we just start with this completely feral, gritty, distorted synthesizer that sounds like coming out from the bowels of hell. And it's just so brutal sounding. It's just so unforgiving, and it's immediately clear that this is not going to be a very kind of clean, pretty EP. This is something else entirely. And what we're doing so well here is I think we're using the synthesizers to make the drum parts. So we have the kind of attack and decay and sort of release tails on these envelopes of these synthesizers, and you can get them to go boom, and you can add a note behind it to kind of reinforce a key signature. But when you do the same thing and add sort of a noise filter to the snare and get that kind of glitching in the mid-range, if it's a different note that's maybe not even diatonic to the original kind of bass kick, it's very kind of creepy sounding and kind of menacing, and I kind of like the angst to it. And we have these kind of machine droning elements there, wow, 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 with these kind of oscillations there, the yellow faux putting in the work there. And that is an occasional bass there. Even though we have basses, there are drums and other ones are the basses, and you're kind of spending some of the time with this track not only appreciating the groove to it with the mixture, of course, it's 8ths and 16ths and maybe even sort of like triplet meters, but also trying to figure out what's what. But these kind of glitchy upper range textures with portamento on them, kind of like spacing out there, you can imagine Triela kind of literally getting these dials and knobs and kind of moving about it with either automation or literally as they record there. It's a very kind of trippy psychedelic experience. We have some sort of electric guitar textures as well that kind of oscillate and loop in the environment there, and they kind of almost form a unison with one of the notes in the lower end as a root note, even if we're not trying to necessarily, because the irony is with all these different notes and going in all these different directions, it's just kind of boom, boom. There's this one unison root note, despite the complexity of the harmony. It's cool because it manages to both be very colorful with these different ideas as they go off in their own directions, whilst also being easy enough to follow along to if you're not paying attention to everything else, and you're able to isolate a main sort of direction it's proceeding in melodically. Oh, there's a part where it says get in the car, I think it is. Gecko, get in the car. So are they off on a ride somewhere? Are they off on an adventure somewhere, get in the car, ready to sort of like shit up? I'm not sure. It's it's cool, man. But again, like if you had any of these sort of tones and textures, these synthesizers by themselves individually, they might sound cool, but that sound a little bit thin. Part of what makes this track work so well is that we're stacking stuff within the frequency spectrum and different sort of frequency layers to be able to sort of make it sound thick and full. It's the mixture of those different rhythmic phrasings as well, with some sort of dominant quarter note accents, to be fair, that both make it sort of like cohesive. And of course we have chromatics and sort of like uncomfortable notes there when things kind of flutter, they fluctuate there, but in the grand sort of digital ecoscape of things, you kind of expect the computers to load as they figure out what's going on. And as the guy kind of screams through the mix, you're kind of thinking, okay, is this the person inside their own simulation trying to figure out how to escape? But there's just a sense of freneticism with an almost constant sort of like arpeggiated kind of solo section in the background there. And because everything is not the same loudness, there are some parts that are a bit thinner in tone, I suppose, in terms of their actual body, they're smaller rather than the actual like levels of the individual components. They niche things well because there's like clear attention on certain elements when it enters. Like despite how busy it is, the vocals still are prominent. But I also think again, because the vocals are a bit more sort of misty and sort of more difficult to decipher, it gives some of those more sort of clear electronic elements more room to breathe when they're required. What I dig about it is that the drums, once we're sort of used to the tone of those, like initially you might be like, oh, what are we doing with these kind of percussive ideas? They sound a bit strange on their own, but they become normalized. Dun 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 dun. There's this kind of groove that perpetuates throughout most of the piece there, and you're kind of taken on a journey with everything else in a way where those drums end up being safe harbor, I suppose. And then you kind of end it wondering what's occurred there in a positive way. You're led into this ecoscape where Triela manages to distinguish themselves as being quite unique in terms of a lot of other electronic that I personally have heard there, this kind of avant-garde kind of way of it. But then it's not fair to call it avant-garde because there's fundamentals of, let's say, like modern, like the last 125 years of music theory here. You know, like we have a key signature, we have a minor leaning there. If there are chromatics or just sort of uncomfortable moments, they're occasional there. We're not deliberately trying to make it a sort of abrasive sounding. It's just that we have cool digital kind of glitchy kind of square or triangle kind of synths, or, you know, like oscillated. It's more that we know, for example, we can't have too much of either the triangles or the square waves or anything like that because it might sound a bit blunt there. We ride the line a bit, but it's typically sort of minor oriented there with a bit of danger and spice because of a lot of distortion with the individual layers. The busyness of a lot of those sort of like sub leads and leads lets you know that you're hitting somewhere quite intense, so that's kind of overwhelming there, despite the drums not necessarily trying to deliberately sort of interpret that themselves. But I kind of just like, as a final note on the extra instrumental forms themselves there, I can hear some free-flowing kind of organic stuff in terms of the way that some of those synth leads are played. It's like we kind of had these flutters and trills there, and it's just nice to know that someone's like been playing those instruments there, that there's that bit of kind of flair on their part there to kind of adjust those tails and not make them too sort of similar or, you know, continuous. Again, when you have the drums in the state that they are, they're formulating kind of like this kind of main sort of rhythmic orient, you can do whatever you want on top of it, and the bell curve comes down at the end with that kind of little kind of glitter of synth before it peters out at the end, and you don't know what you're getting next. You just know that it's gonna be kind of fun, I suppose, in a weird sense, but also a different experience to a lot of other kind of stuff you might have heard recently. Especially in a day and age where a lot of people are trying to deliberately sort of overproduce their music, it's nice that we are stripping back the layers and trying not to overcomplicate things. Despite the fact that I can imagine there would have been quite a lot of kind of proficiency involved to be able to create this music this way in the first place. Studio recording, mixing and mastering, I do like the way the vocals are produced. I think, again, the lack of clarity for them within the mix is totally fine there. When you add the context to the piece and the way that everything else is so kind of bright and straightforward. I like the use of portamento and the staging in a different sense within the frequency spectrum as well as the stereo field. You know, the music surrounds you in the headphones there. I like that the percussion is pitched there due to the synth production on that. I like that there's dynamic range both compositionally and kind of production-wise, but also it's like it's not meant to be too sort of like of a massive sort of like shift and loudness. You're kind of sent into this part of the world and you're going through that wild journey until the end. It's nice and loud with a bit of pumping there, side chaining, bus compression limiting is handled. No applicable constructive critique on my part, just a very sort of like, I had a great time with it. I dig when people approach a style of music that's been well done and they strip back the layers of it or try to approach from a different perspective, use unconventional tones and textures and try and make their own music and do something that people will recognize as being worth their time. And what I mean by that is, it's not only that we're making something that sounds unique, it's that we're deliberately trying to still make it sound good so that it's approachable and accessible to people. I feel like that's the secret to success in the music industry, is making music that you yourself have a passion for whilst trying to make it your own style of things. But you also need to add your own sort of flair on it, and you also, if you want a career, need to find some way to make it approachable. I feel like Triela has done that very well here with this track Gecko off of the EP Gecko, and thank you for watching my review of this track. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please go show us some love via their various social medias and a Spotify page, and stay cool and stay safe. Please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they need to help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And just before I go, I want to give a shout out. I didn't mention this at the time, but I love how they managed to get those synthesizers to sound like guitars as well as drums. They legitimately sound like guitar solos. I didn't mention that in the main sort of conclusion section. I know this is a longer video anyways, but I like how we were able to sort of make it sound like that. It's just very clever production. Synth leads and guitars share a lot texturally and timbrally, especially when there's distortion involved. So it was very, very cool, but I'll catch you in the next SP Reacts. Spiderhands out.